Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle McKenzie. I'm a marketing manager at WatchGuard Technologies. Today we are coming to you from our corporate headquarters on a rather beautiful and sunny day in Seattle, Washington. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us today for our webinar, Rise of the Smart Firewall. I have here with me Peter McNall, a sales engineer at WatchGuard. Peter has been with WatchGuard for 14 years. Today he works with WatchGuard Internet security products as a support engineer and a sales engineer. Peter has used his in-depth technical knowledge to help customers large and small define the security issues that they are experiencing and present them with solutions that meet their challenges. Peter, I will now hand the presentation over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Michelle. Today we're going to talk about the rise of the smart firewall and how now is the time for UTM. While it sounds like science fiction, it really is not. The UTM firewall is available for you today and, in fact, is able to help you solve the security issues that you may be having. So let's take a look at some of the elements of what a smart firewall is. The key and most important thing for you is that it solves the security issues that you're having. But there are other elements you should consider when looking at unified threat management. First thing, is it capable of addressing blended threats? Is it designed to evolve to meet new and emerging threats? Is it built on a modular platform that leverages the best technologies available, that is not limited to just a subset of the solutions that you really do need? Does it reduce the complexity of network security while at the same time improves your overall security? Does it not penalize you when you enable all of the security features? Does it do all of the above but provides it a significant cost savings to you? Well, if it does, then that is certainly the definition of a smart firewall. So what we're going to do today is talk more about this and more about UTM firewalls in general. But I think it's important that we take a look back and look at the evolution of the firewall process, because I think it'll give us a much better, clearer understanding as why the Unified Threat Management appliance or approach is the best way to go. The first introduction of firewalls was a packet filter, very basic, and was generally just an add-on to a routing device. It was able to identify ports and IP addresses and allowed you to build access control lists. Shortly after that was the introduction of the proxy. This was a huge advance in terms of security. It enabled the network administrator to set up policies that restricted the flow of data between the remote server and the client. In fact, that remote server never touched the client directly and allowed the administrator a tremendous amount of control over that connection. To improve upon the packet filter, the introduction of the stateful packet filter was developed, and that's called stateful packet inspection. To improve on that was the stateful packet firewall with DPI, or deep packet inspection. And typically that used some sort of an IPS solution to be bolted onto that to be able to provide a deeper inspection of the data flows. But in all cases, these firewalls required additional single-purpose solutions to address security issues that they could not address without them. So if we go advance a few years, what you now see is the emergence of the next-generation firewall. This firewall, while building on the solutions that came before it, still offers a limited solution set on the box: IPS, application control, and centralized management. Now, while offering some security, there's obviously additional security issues that you're having. And that's where the UTM, or the Unified Threat Management appliance, really excels. In this case, it offers everything that the previous classes of firewalls provided. Additionally, more robust centralized management, cloud reputation systems, web content control, spam control, AV and malware scanning, spam control for looking for phishing and blended threats, IPS, application control, and now included in that would be wireless controllers so that you can apply a unified security approach to all devices that are connecting to your network. In fact, that list continues to grow. The Unified Threat Management appliance combines multiple services into a single appliance. Typically, if you were using any of the previous firewall strategies that I outlined, you would have separate devices for each one of those controls. Application control, URL filtering, anti-spam, AV, IPS, and firewalling would all reside on silos inside your network. So what are the advantages from consolidation? Well, lower cost, of course. Many of my customers find that by reducing the number of single-point appliances, saves them a significant amount of money. In fact, 50% in many cases. I can give you many examples of customers that replaced just a couple of single-point pieces and were able to provide a new UTM appliance and all the additional services at the same cost as that one solution. In addition to savings, there's also the benefit of improving your security. That happens when you take all of these services and put them into a single policy. It reduces complexity, and complexity can often lead to insecure firewall installations. In fact, a recent report shows that if you look at today's security threats and compromises, oftentimes the root cause of that is a misconfigured device, a misconfigured firewall. The Unified Threat Management Appliance reduces that by having all of the services on a single box presented to you using a single management console. So let's talk about WatchGuard as it relates to the Unified Threat Management Appliance. In fact, WatchGuard was a pioneer when it came to Unified Threat Management. In 1996, WatchGuard introduced the first firewall appliance that introduced transparent proxies that allowed the administrator to look at the connection between the client and the server and apply very strong security. Additionally, we were able to enforce protocols so that we were able to detect a protocol anomaly. We also included web content filtering, authentication, the ability to match users with policies, real-time monitoring. So what happened in the next 10 years? Well, we added more functionality, more UTM capabilities to include spam control, IPS, AV malware scanning, dynamic behavior blocking, and centralized management. And as we keep going on to the future, from 2013 and beyond, what you see is the addition of application control, reputation analysis, mobile remote access, wireless AP controllers, and logging and reporting. So if you look at WatchGuard in terms of the UTM, over a period of since the start of the company, we've really been a pioneer in this area. Let's take a look at the adoption of the UTM firewall and the next generation firewall in the security space. What we have here is a graph presented by Gartner, and in this we can chart the adoption of various technologies over time. The way that the chart works here, it goes from left to right, starting with the introduction of the technology with a lot of expectation, a lot of hope. And oftentimes that leads to a peak of expectation followed by a trough of disillusionment that then flows back up into a slope of enlightenment and then a plateau of productivity. Essentially, you go from that moment of having a great idea, executing on that, and then making it into a really solid platform to build out a better security solution. So let's take a look at how the UTM firewall and the next generation firewall compare in the adoption. In August of 2011, UTM firewalls were just moving up the slope of enlightenment. Next generation firewalls had a bit of a head start and were clearly already being adopted. 1 year later, though, you can see that the UTM firewall has moved up that slope of enlightenment very rapidly. In fact, much more rapidly than the next generation firewall. And in fact, probably within the next year or two, will exceed the capabilities and the adoption of the next generation firewall. So what makes a smart firewall? Well, the next section, what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit or illustrate a bit why I think WatchGuard is a smart firewall and why it's an excellent choice when you're talking about a UTM platform. First, the foundation. WatchGuard at its core is designed to be the best unified threat management appliance that's out there. First off, we partner with best-of-breed hardware providers, Freescale and Intel. That allows us to be quite flexible and to provide you as the customer the best performing hardware available to drive the solutions that we have on our appliance. The next thing we've done is we've standardized our operating system across all devices. So just because you may have the desktop model, you have the best security available. The same security, in fact, as the folks that are buying the data center size appliance. The next piece is the application proxy. That represents the core of our strength, the core of our security that we provide, again, on all platforms. The next layer within that is the modular component pieces, meaning that we can take additional services and apply them as necessary. Today we have AV, URL filtering, anti-spam, IPS, application control, VPN capabilities, and reputation-enabled defense. And then you'll see that there's an open spot for us to add additional features and functions as the product evolves to meet new and emerging security threats. And then layered on top of that is probably one of the most important pieces, and that's the management piece. That allows you to see all of these solutions in a single view without having to think about it as separate devices. It's all integrated into one solution. One of the other strategies we've chosen is a best-in-class security strategy. And that means an understanding that WatchGuard sometimes isn't the best available solution when it comes to things like web content filtering, or AV scanning, or mail spam solutions on box. What it allows us to do is to partner with WebSense and AVG, Mailshell, Broadweb, and build the solutions that only we can do, and that's reputation-enabled defense, and offer US-based tech support. And I'm going to explain more about this as we talk about the specific features and solutions inside of our appliance. So let's compare WatchGuard to some of our competitors when we talk about best in class. As I said, WatchGuard chooses to enable and work with the best solution providers in various categories. Let's take, for example, AV. AV scanning is a huge task and often left to the experts. In fact, we partner with AVG and Kaspersky in this. This allows us to have the best coverage and provide you with the best solution. Other firewall vendors out there choose to use their own solution in their appliance. Well, when was the last time you saw SonicWall or Fortinet being compared with AVG or Kaspersky? Probably never, and I doubt you ever will. So the solution is clearly the best option. Work with the best folks out there, integrate it into our appliance and our management, and provide you the best solution possible. Another aspect of the UTM firewall is the manageability of multiple services in a single platform or a single view. And WatchGuard has been recognized as a leader in this. In fact, we provide 3 ways to manage your appliance: the CLI, the Web UI, and our award-winning Windows application. With this view, you're able to see not only a single box, but multiple boxes across your entire enterprise. This allows you to build out those policies across one location and then distribute that across all of your locations in a single view, utilizing templates. This is a much stronger way of being able to build out a security policy that would be coherent across the entire ecosystem. Let's take a moment and talk about performance. Oftentimes when you're comparing firewalls, you're looking at that top line speed. How fast can I get from one point to the other point? But the reality is, when you're talking about security, there's often many things that you have to do. And on a UTM firewall, that's where the performance really comes in handy. So if this is to represent our security landscape as a network administrator, I think you would agree that this is probably a bad representation. Typically, our environments are not the straight, narrow, sunny, clear skies, but rather they require us to enable and utilize many services. In fact, this is probably a better representation of our day-to-day challenges. A windy, twisty road with variable weather and sometimes stormy. So what's the best solution to get you down the superhighway? Is it this? The hot sports car that only allows you 1 or 2 services? But I think that's probably not the case. I think when you're talking about network security and all the things that you're asking it to do, for example, like IPS, virus scanning, spam, application control, web content filtering, malware detection, and then on top of that, all the other things a firewall typically does: NAT, VPN, routing. Well, if you factor in all of the things that a firewall typically does in your environment, you're going to need something with a bit more power, a bit more performance to get you down that twisting, winding road. And when you got to get muddy to stop those hackers and identify malware, well, I think you'll find that the UTM with the full services is really the best way to go. The WatchGuard firewall is optimized for UTM performance. That means when you enable all services, you're going to get the best performance, because that's the way you want your security. You want to be able to identify viruses, malware, and be able to stop those at the gateway. So when you compare our firewalls to our competitors, oftentimes you're finding yourself having to purchase a much larger appliance from them to get the same performance out of our firewalls. So when you look at firewalls and you're comparing performance numbers, make sure you're comparing the numbers that really matter, the UTM numbers, because those are the ones that represent the security solutions that you're going to enable when you are working day to day to be able to identify and block attacks. So now for the second half of the presentation, I want to talk about some of the features that you find in UTM, because what it gets down to is solving your security issues. So this is probably the security issue that most of us face every day. How do we get our users the things that they need and be able to do it in a secure fashion? The irony is we allow them to do probably the two most insecure things available on the internet today. That is web browsing or getting their email. So the strategy that I suggest, which actually is quite easy to do with the Unified Threat Management Appliance, is first identify your users, the applications that they're using, and that gives you context. And I'll give you my personal example. I was helping with a bank not too long ago with setting up their WatchGuard firewalls, and we happened to replace the Cisco appliances because they weren't able to offer the UTM solution set. The problem was I didn't know who the users were or what applications they were using. So when I went and configured the firewall around application control and web content, who knew bankers need access to LinkedIn? Well, I certainly found out the next day. So the story is, or the moral of the story is that you need to know who your users are and what applications. So you take your users, you would typically integrate that with Active Directory. You take that information, you apply it to the policy framework or the firewall rule, and then you apply services with that. Maybe that's AV inspection or web content filtering. You save that to the firewall, and the firewall is now making decisions on whether to allow or to deny traffic. But there's another element to that, and that's the feedback mechanism. That's what I got the next morning from that bank I was helping. From that, I was able to build a better policy, more secure. So when you consider installation or the setup of your firewall, make sure you understand the users and their applications so that we can do it utilizing context. So let's take a little bit more depth in what I'm talking about. On the left, I have one group separated from another group on the right. Obviously, they have different requirements, and so I want to be able to identify them when they log in the morning, and that's done through single sign-on with Active Directory integration. The next step is to determine what applications they need access to, and I would do that by creating their individual application rule. And then maybe some web content rules would be specific to each group. But I'm able to do that because I'm understanding the users and applying that within the policy. The next step is obviously understanding applications. And this just changed tremendously over the past few years. In fact, when we all started learning how to configure firewalls in our first days as network administrators, it was probably a much easier process. You just had to open port 80 and allow the traffic out. Well, today that's not always the best solution, is it? If you look over what happens on port 80, there's a lot. There's instant messaging, there's Facebook type applications where the website itself is actually an application platform. There's videos, there's all sorts of things that you may want to consider when you're enabling this for your users. Let's take a look at some of the reasons why you might want to be concerned about applications. The first one would be social networking. Now I know oftentimes when we think of social networking, it's a way to keep up with the kids, the grandparents, that type of thing. But in today's business world, social networking is a key component to staying in touch with our customers. The challenge, though, as a network administrator is to be able to differentiate who should have access and who doesn't need access. And then one more step, those users that do have access, we want to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and not playing Mafia Wars or Farmville or even playing poker all day. Some other considerations around application control are specific to data loss, right? If you're in an area where you have compliancy concerns, either HIPAA or PCI, then for sure you need to pay attention to the applications that our users have access to. Let's consider Dropbox. In fact, Dropbox is a great application. I use it all the time. But if I had access to confidential information and I was in your organization, wouldn't you be concerned that I could take anything I have access to, put it into my Dropbox folder, and in an instant it's now stored on a remote file storage somewhere? In fact, Dropbox a couple of years ago did have some security issues. So that's something I definitely, as a network administrator, and I think you too, would want to pay attention to. There are other applications that are great examples of this. How about instant messaging? Next time you go walking through your environment, take a look at how many people are using instant messaging. While it seems rather harmless, remember it does have a file transfer component that's already been installed. There's also peer-to-peer applications in BitTorrent that have all sorts of issues. Now for BitTorrent, what I'll focus on is the bandwidth utilization on that particular application. Let's imagine that you have a wireless environment and a few users that decide to download some intellectual property, maybe some movies. What do you think the impact in your wireless environment is going to be if I am allowed to run those applications from my laptops or my tablets? Probably pretty significant. So we definitely want to pay attention to these applications because not only do they introduce potentially malware, stolen software or intellectual property, but also the impact they have on performance of our networks overall. So what is the process of understanding and applying rules to applications? Well, I told you WatchGuard in 1996 introduced the first transparent proxies. That was definitely the first step. That enabled WatchGuard to identify commonly used protocols and apply very specific policies. It allowed us to look into the data portion of what was being passed between clients and servers and make decisions on that. In fact, we've even extended that to encrypted data sessions. So we'll consider the next time someone is going to an encrypted data site in your environment. Do you have access to that? Can you see what they're doing? Probably not. It's actually a blind spot right through your environment. So with the WatchGuard of firewalls, you can actually enable an HTTPS proxy. So what that means is that the data is encrypted from the client to the WatchGuard. WatchGuard goes out and gets that session or that website. It's also encrypted, but within the firewall itself, it's a decrypted HTTP session, which allows you to apply application control, AV, IPS inspection to that hidden traffic. So let's take a little bit more about proxies. And I use this as an illustration because it really is a great way to visualize what a proxy is doing for you. Now, if you remember with The Man with a Golden Gun, which was a great movie, by the way, the attacker in this case was able to elude security systems by dismantling his weapon and then reassembling them to take out his victim. Well, that's very much the way data travels across the internet. It doesn't come in one piece. It comes in multiple pieces. And then it's up to the security solutions to figure it out. Is it safe or if it's not safe? Let's take a look at another example. Here on the left, I have a security solution that's going to protect my clients. So let's pretend the data now has arrived. And as I said, it comes in a lot of little pieces. So as a security solution, I have to look at each one of them and determine whether it's safe or not safe to pass it through to the client. Do I have a signature for this piece? I don't. It must be okay. How about this piece? Well, this one's okay too. And this one? And this one. Absolutely. All are safe. I can continue to allow that traffic to pass through the client. Oops. Looks like it was actually an attack. And the host is now compromised. So let's consider the application proxy and some of the security benefits with that. In the same scenario, the data shows up and arrives. But rather than check each piece and forward it on to the client, I reassemble the entire thing. And now I can see, oh my gosh, this really is dangerous payload, and I need to be able to make a decision. Do I allow it to the client or not? In this case, absolutely not, because I don't want my clients to be compromised and distribute malware inside my environment. So that was the first step. And obviously, evolution says things have to change. And so we've had to add additional functionality. And that's controlling applications by using a signature set provided to us by Broadweb, which allows us to identify 1,800 different applications. So not only are we able to enforce protocol and make sure things are working right, we can see what actually is happening. What are our users doing? So let's take the example of Facebook. Remember earlier I said it's not really a website anymore, it's a platform for applications. So I have my users on the left, those are the teachers. I'm going to allow them to go to Facebook, to that application platform, and update the school presence on Facebook, but I don't want them playing the games. So I build that into the security policy, I save it to the firewall, and now teachers can get to the things that they need to, while students, on the other hand, based on who they are when they authenticated, have no access to Facebook. That's very important. That's a lot of power that we're providing you. How about web content control? You know, it used to be that web content control was all about being big brother, keeping people off of websites that you didn't necessarily agree with. But really, I think we've evolved past that. Now, web content filtering is much more of a security solution. It can enhance the overall security in your environment. In fact, our partnership with WebSense allows you to leverage many categories within the 125 category database that are specific to security. Not only desktops and laptops, but also your mobile devices when that traffic is passing through the firewall. And it helps you meet the CIPA requirements if you're in school environment to make sure your students are safe and your E-rate will continue to flow. How about AV scanning on the appliance? This is very important because we can identify websites that are distributing malcode, often because they become hijacked. So at WatchGuard, we partner with AVG. Remember, I said we want the best solution available when we want top-tier AV vendors looking at that data. So we partner with AVG. So that allows us to have a signature database of about 2.5 million signatures on box. In fact, we buffer that data as it's passing through the appliance so we can get a better catch rate. We can do dynamic heuristic analysis and code emulation on the firewall, and we can decompress up to 5 different levels to be able to make sure that no one's trying to hide that malicious payload, in fact trying to pass it into our clients. But the really cool part about this is not the fact that we're doing AV scanning. Well, I think personally it's pretty cool, but that there's another element to that, right? You don't necessarily want a firewall that's just going to scan it and drop it. That's what you would expect. What a smart firewall would do would be to scan it, inspect it, and then make another decision, right? We're going to notify you as administrator that we did something for you, but we're going to enhance your security. In fact, we're going to enhance everybody's security by reporting that information back to our cloud server. That's called our reputation-enabled defense. And what that does is make sure that we can identify hijacked websites and share that information across our entire deployment of firewalls. So in this particular case, if we look at the user on the right, they're making an outbound connection to a website. Well, the firewall is going to do a quick lookup and say, hey, what do you know about this website? In fact, consider NBC not too long ago. They were compromised in distributing malcode. So in this particular case, if this user was trying to get to NBC, the firewall would have gone out to that website, downloaded the connection initially, scanned it, and go, oh my gosh, this website is distributing malcode. I blocked it from going into your environment, but I have to tell everyone else. So we update the database so that the user on the left, when they go to the same website, they don't even have to start the download process. We know by reputation that this is a dangerous site, and we don't have to waste any CPU cycles coming up to that conclusion. That is what a smart firewall is all about. So let's consider some other ways that clients become compromised by browsing the web. Oftentimes it's because of a SQL injection or a cross-site scripting attack that's happened on the website that they're visiting. Well, on the WatchGuard firewall, we have an intrusion prevention system with many signatures specifically looking for those types of things that can compromise the client. This database is auto-updating. In fact, you can apply these same signatures across any policy you create. And there's one other thing I really like about this. It's the fact that it's easy for me to deploy, and I have the option of selecting something called block. Now, what blocking does, again, it enhances the security of our environment. And what it means is that the firewall can then do something really pretty smart. Let me give you an example. Let's say that my users have been out on the website and they've been browsing somewhere. They come across a really dangerous website that has some sort of IPS trigger associated with it. Well, the firewall is going to block that, obviously. It's going to send me a notification, and it's going to take the source of that attack and add it to a blocked sites list. And that's not just for IPS. It could be for any policy that I create. In fact, on my firewalls, I have a blocking policy. So if someone attempts a telnet or an SSH connection to my firewall, I'm blocking it. And I'm blocking the source so I don't have to accept any more traffic. Again, that's part of what being a smart firewall is all about. And then the other piece. Remember a while back I told you that I had configured that bank's firewall without really knowing the context? Well, it was the logs and the reports I was able to see that gave me more context and allowed me to create a better security policy. So the monitoring, the alerting, the reporting are key elements to a strong security solution, and one that's integrated to the WatchGuard Unified Threat Management Appliance. We provide real-time tools. We provide logging, reporting, whether that's on-demand or archive. We provide HostWatch. And actually, the really nice thing about HostWatch is I can look at the connections as they're passing through the firewall. And from that screen, I can say, I want to block that destination. Or that looks suspicious, I'm going to block the source. And then on top of that, I have my top level views to be able to make sure that everything's running well. And if it's not, I can start the drill down process to find out what needs my attention. So when you consider your security dilemma, the irony of allowing your users out to the internet and be able to provide a secure way of doing that, you have to come to the conclusion that WatchGuard is the right choice. It's a smart choice, and it'll make you look pretty smart as well. So what's included with that decision that you just made? All of your logging, an application proxy firewall capabilities, also the stateful inspection, networking, authentication so I can integrate with single sign-on and Active Directory, my VPN capabilities so I can build tunnels between remote offices, and remote users, whether they're on iPhones or iPads or Android devices. URL filtering that not only prevents them from going to sites that might get me in trouble with my students or with HR, with people abusing the ability to go to the web, but also provides much better security. Spam solution that enables me to stop spam and identify attacks associated with email. AV scanning that not only scans and protects my users, but contributes to our reputation-enabled defense to be able to offer a global defense strategy for all WatchGuard appliances installed. IPS solution looking for things like SQL injection and cross-site scripting attacks that are often used to compromise clients. Application control to make sure that the applications my users need are being provided for, and blocking the applications that might be using too much bandwidth or wasting time. And last, and probably one of the most important things, is the reputation-enabled defense. Not only are we taking feeds from our AVG that's on our firewalls, but also from Kaspersky and other manufacturers' solutions to be able to provide you the best possible defense that can address those hijacked websites that keep cropping up. So when you look at the WatchGuard UTM approach, one appliance, one platform, many solutions, that all adds up to real value. So remember, when you're looking at firewalls and the UTM approach, you have a choice. You can continue on using a siloed approach that costs you more money and adds more complexity into your environment and potentially more risk, or you can choose the WatchGuard UTM platform as the better solution for you. So with that, I want to thank you for attending today. It's been my pleasure to talk to you about WatchGuard as a UTM Unified Threat Management appliance and really the smart solution for your security. Thank you and have a good day.